Hey, this is Ryan with Goodwin Racing, and today we're going to talk about Helmholtz chambers. What are they? How do they work? If you're surfing goodwinracing.com and looking at all of our exhaust options for the Mazda MX5 and Mazda Miata, you'll probably notice a lot of references to Helmholtz chambers these days. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about just what they are or how they operate. So we're going to try to clear that up and give you a good general understanding of the Helmholtz chamber subject. Now, if I had to give just a brief explanation of what a Helmholtz chamber is, then, we gloss over how it does what it does. Essentially, all you really need to know is that it's a passive system. There's no moving parts or anything inside here. It's a totally passive system that effectively cancels out the low-frequency sounds that most people consider undesirable, the boominess or the drum, which a lot of people refer to it as. And if you've ever opened up an exhaust system in a car and you start to get a bunch of great notes, but then you notice that at certain RPMs, you get that sort of boomy, deep sound, and it's kind of reverberating in your ears, and you're like, man, that's not really enjoyable. Or actually, if you've ever had one window in a car rolled down and all the other windows are up, and at a certain speed, you get this sort of shuddering inside the car, and it's kind of like this reverberation inside the car. You've effectively created a Helmholtz chamber, but your car is the chamber, and the opening in the window is the inlet. So you actually experience the Helmholtz phenomenon a lot more often than you realize. But as it pertains to exhaust on cars, it's a very cool technology where people have figured out how to implement it into exhaust to have very specific results, and specifically to cancel that drone out. It's a very cool way to do it. Back in the day, because of course we've been putting exhaust on cars for years and years, right? As you open an exhaust up more, you get more of that drone. It's just it comes with the territory, right? And so the only way to really combat it, you could play with, baffled chambers and stuff inside a muffler. We did some of that years ago before Helmholtz chambers was really an accessible technology that we could fine tune and figure out how to make work. But really, it got louder. As the car got louder, you got more drone, and that drone volume increased as well. And the only way to really fight it was to put more resonators in the system to bring the overall volume back down. And at some point, then the drone wasn't, you brought the volume of the drone down as well, along with everything else, to a point where, your ears weren't being bothered anymore. But if you wanted a car with more volume, it just came with the territory. Helmholtz chambers have allowed us to target that drone and cancel out or substantially reduce those drone frequencies and not mess with the rest of the sound that's coming out of the tailpipe, all the stuff that we want to hear. So it's been very cool for that purpose. Now, going back to the very beginning, Hermann von Helmholtz was the one that pioneered a lot of the study of Helmholtz chambers, and that's why his name is attached to it. He essentially was studying how air pressure and flow interacts with a opening into a sealed chamber. Found that he could create certain tones by, fluctuating the volume of the chamber or the airflow and things like that. So in a car, and this is getting a little more detailed, but we're not going to get into the math of it and get too sciencey, but we will get a little detailed to explain how this actually works. So this is actually a prototype of one of our superstring mufflers that never went into production. This particular version never went into production. This is just one iteration in a step of many as we were fine-tuning this. But this is the Helmholtz chamber here. You've got this small neck that goes to the main exhaust flow. Now, all of the exhaust flow is coming from the mid-pipe and going straight through that tube and out the tips. This sealed chamber with this small neck, there's a small, the exhaust flow is passing over this small neck here. And there's not a very significant amount of flow, very, very little, if any, flow actually going into this chamber. But because this is sealed, you have a volume of air inside here, you get a pressure buildup inside the chamber, and then that pressure has to go somewhere. So you get this tiny exchange of air pressure in and out of this chamber via the neck. And that small exchange of pressure is like a fluctuation, and you actually get this micro oscillation of pressure. You could almost think of it as like the air molecules vibrating, and that vibration creates a tone, a sound tone at a certain frequency. And it was found that you could actually change the volume of this chamber and create a different tone. Now, that right there is pretty darn cool. And by the way, you actually see Helmholtz chamber effects, like I said, with, you roll a window down and you can hear it in the car sometimes at a certain speed. This stuff gets used in subwoofer boxes. This technology now is used in some subwoofer boxes, and a lot of musical instruments are actually utilizing the Helmholtz chamber in a way, even if they don't really realize that's what they're doing. That's what's happening. It's used in architecture. And actually, you could also think of it as another example. When you blow air over a bottle that's empty and you create a tone, that's exactly what you're doing with a Helmholtz chamber. But the difference is that that's the first half of what's happening here. But when they figured out that they could fine-tune this volume to create that specific tone, they took it another step further with regards to automotive exhausts. Because then what you're able to do is, if you can specifically pinpoint a sound frequency that you don't want, that you want to get rid of in the exhaust note, then what we can do is we fine tune the volume of this to produce an opposing canceling sound frequency to target that other frequency and cancel it out. And so what you did, we don't actually ever hear the effect. Well, you don't ever hear the tone that the Helmholtz chamber is producing. It's all about what you don't hear, because that tone is canceling another tone that's being created by the engine, and it's targeting that and it's just canceling it out. Or I hate to say cancel, because it's like 100% it's gone. It substantially reduces it. Nothing is ever perfect, but it substantially reduces those frequencies. Now, there's always going to be one frequency that it targets the best, but it's always going to be a bell-shaped curve in terms of its overall effect. And so you're going to have a certain frequency that's going to be just canceling out almost completely. And then on either side of that, when you're looking at like a sound spectrum, there will be a bell shape to, it's also canceling the sort of range of sound. And there are certain things you can do with fine-tuning the shape and size of this chamber to broaden that curve if you want it, or narrow it and focus on just a narrower range of sound. Bunch of cool tricks that you can do. But that's what the Helmholtz chamber is doing. It's basically targeting and eliminating or reducing substantially the specific undesirable sound frequencies that we don't want to have in the exhaust. Now that brings us to the fine-tuning part of it. And the process that we go through to get an exhaust that's got a Helmholtz chamber that's properly tuned for the motor. It is a rather extensive one. Like I said, this is a prototype. We have an entire room full of prototype mufflers and mid-pipes and exhaust pieces that are all just the iterative steps from, trying something out, tweaking it. Oh, it's a little better. We need to, change this or that. And, further steps all the way to the point where we end up with something that's, ready for production. Every once in a while we hear about somebody going, oh, I saw a thing about Helmholtz chambers, and I did the math, and it says that it should be, according to the math, it should be this volume. And I'm going to make one of those and weld it up and put it on my car. And we're like, hold on a second. It's a lot more complicated than that. The theory is sound. The math really just gets you to the front door, though. And from there, you have to build a prototype, put it on the car, and test it. So when we develop a Helmholtz chamber exhaust for a car, we start with actually hooking the car up to sound sensors and driving the car and recording it. And that's step one. And then you identify the frequencies that are the drone frequencies. And it's different on every car, and, whether the top is up or down, or whether it's a hard top or a soft top. And, it's always a little bit different. And, if it's a Mustang, it's going to be completely different than if it's a Miata. With a Miata, there's some nuanced differences between certain configurations, but for the most part, because it's that motor, we can target, okay, this is what the Miata is making for drone. Once we've identified the frequencies we want to cancel, we do the math on what size Helmholtz chamber should work to cancel out those frequencies. And then we build a prototype and we start the testing. And we find that it gets you somewhere in the ballpark, but we've got a dozen prototypes that are steps from that point to the point of it being, we're really happy with it. Now it's time, to make it a production part to actually go out and sell it and offer it to you guys. Now, as I said, this is no moving parts. And that's one of, I think, the biggest misunderstandings about Helmholtz chambers, because there's a lot of other things out there that you see with exhausts, especially even from the factory these days. You've got, actuator valves and all sorts of stuff that, this flaps open at a certain RPM and this and that. To be honest, our opinion about all that is that's a bunch of gimmicks that are just more moving parts that are going to fail on you at some point. The cool thing about the Helmholtz is that it is no more a moving part than a regular exhaust tube. There's nothing to add or reduce. There's nothing to reduce from the reliability of it. And also what's cool is that because there's nothing in here, there's no valves, there's nothing inside. This is just a hollow case. And because of that, this is thin wall stainless steel. And so it's actually quite light. It doesn't weigh very much. And so you can end up having a Helmholtz chambered integrated onto an exhaust that's otherwise still quite a light option. Even with the Super Street that you see here, this is a Super Street twin tip with a Super Street single tip, and with our race muffler, we wanted to have the smoothest exhaust flow, so the straightest path, smoothest flow from the mid-pipe out the tips. That meant that the exhaust was completely on the passenger side of the car over here. Now there's two hangers over here, but if you just use those two hangers, the exhaust is going to, hang really funky and it's not going to be supported. The other two hangers for the muffler are over on this side of the car. And so you've got to somehow get over here for the, not sure if you can see that, but for another hanger position. So we positioned the Helmholtz chamber here to serve a second purpose. And not only do you have the Helmholtz chamber, but it's also spanning this gap, and then you've got the hanger over here. Instead of having to run a massive rod, and since this is a solid rod, it would actually be quite heavy going all the way over here. So the Helmholtz chamber adds almost nothing compared to just having a rod go all the way over. So just another example of why Helmholtz chambers don't add a very significant amount of weight while having a lot of benefit. Now, when you're looking on our website at all the various Helmholtz chamber options, depending on what generation you're looking at, what generation of Miata you're looking at, the options are going to be a little bit different. Integrating a Helmholtz chamber into an exhaust is a relatively speaking a new thing or recent thing. And so when the ND, the fourth generation MX5 came out, that's when we really, it was accessible. It was something we could finally implement. And we got started right away with implementing that in all the mufflers for the ND. And so you'll notice that every single one of our ND mufflers had the Helmholtz chamber integrated into it. Now, there's something like the Super Street has an external Helmholtz chamber. So by external, I mean that it's very obvious. You can see it. The chamber is right here. You can see the neck into the main tube. It's very apparent. But it's not always the case. In our Super Q muffler for the ND, it's actually integrated inside the main muffler case. So this is a Roadster Sport 4. This was actually also a prototype for when we were developing that one. But it looks visually just like the Roadster Sport 3 for the NB, second generation Miata. So we had the Roadster Sport 3 already. And then we wanted to go back and integrate the Helmholtz design into it. But instead of doing a separate chamber, this canister was already here in the design. And this entire thing was a Resonator. And so it had a perforated tube in the center, and then you've got the glass packing all around here in this chamber. So what we did was we just basically did a divider and created or utilized this side of the this chamber to turn it into a Helmholtz chamber. And then the remaining volume is still a resonator. So there's some cases like this that you can't see the Helmholtz chamber, but of course we'll state it in the product description that this is one that integrates the Helmholtz technology. And so the Super Q for the ND is another case like that. It looks like just a standard muffler case, but actually inside there you have a resonated section, and then you also have a Helmholtz section. It's just that it's inside the case. It's not immediately apparent. Now for the ND, like I said, we put Helmholtz chambers in all of the mufflers. So whatever muffler you get, you're getting the Helmholtz technology. And we do that because, frankly, nobody says, I really want drone. There's nobody who desires to have that particular element of the exhaust note. Now, Super Q muffler for the ND is like this. It's got a regular, what looks like a muffler canister, but actually inside there is a resonated section and then also a Helmholtz section. So all of the mufflers for the ND have got Helmholtz chambers integrated into them one way or another, external or internal one way or another. Now, when you're looking at the NC section of our website, if you have a 2006 or 2015 MX5, the options are a little bit different. Now, back when we were developing exhausts for the NC originally, Helmholtz chambers weren't really a thing that were happening in exhausts yet. And so after we had done the ND and discovered how effective they are and how cool it is to be able to have that technology and utilize it, we wanted to bring that back and make it available to guys with the NCs, because we've got a bunch of them ourselves. And so the mufflers that we already offered, we had so many people who just loved those mufflers and already had them on their cars. We wanted to have a way for them to be able to get a Helmholtz chamber in the system without having to get rid of their muffler. And so for the NC, we developed this, which is actually mid pipe. And you can see the Helmholtz chamber is external, and it sort of ran shotgun along the mid pipe. That allowed everybody who's already got our mufflers to just upgrade their mid pipe. Now you can have the Helmholtz chamber. You can cancel that drone out far more effectively than anything else that we had prior to that was trying to do that. And so that was a great option for the NC. Now the NA and NB, we had a lot fewer mufflers that were our own mufflers that we had for it. We really only had one, the Roadster Sport 3 model, for the NA and one for the NB. So in that case, it wasn't a case of having 5 different mufflers that were hugely successful already that we didn't want to supersede like we did for the NC. So for the NA and NB, we just took that really good Roadster Sport 3 design, and we took some of that canister space and allotted it to a Helmholtz chamber. Now, a note about that is that if you're, originally if you had this much volume for a resonator, and you take some of that space and, trade that space for now a Helmholtz chamber and then a reduced section of resonator, what you're going to get is you're going to get a more effective reduction in the drone frequencies, because now you have a Helmholtz chamber. You're going to get a less effective reduction in overall volume because you've given up some of your volume that was a resonator. So in general, for the NA or the NB, you're going to get a little more total volume with the Roadster Sport 4, which is the Helmholtz model, than the Roadster Sport 3. But it will be more volume, but of the fun part of the exhaust notes, less drone. So for most people, that's a trade-off that they would actually prefer to make. Not everybody. Somebody's going to be like, I'm really not bothered by drone. I just want to keep the overall volume down a little bit. And the Roadster Sport 3 might be better for that. And that's why we didn't discontinue 3. Similar notes for guys with the NC. The alternative to this mid-pipe, the other Roadster Sport mid-pipe that's been around for a long time, has a resonator in this section. Now, there's only so much straight section on the mid-pipe, and there's only so much space in the transmission tunnel. You're already sharing space with the drive shaft and a power plant frame. So this was kind of the only place where this was really going to fit on the mid-pipe. And so the trade-off is that you get the Helmholtz chamber, you don't have a resonator. So when compared to our standard mid-pipe or a factory mid-pipe, which has a resonator in that section, you're giving that resonator up to have the Helmholtz chamber. Again, same notes. You're going to be dramatically reducing that drone more effectively than anything else could, but you're going to be getting a little more volume of the rest of the exhaust sounds as a result. It's just the trade-off that kind of comes with it. On the ND, it's a little bit of a different equation. You're not really giving up resonator space to have the Helmholtz chamber, because we did that, from the beginning. We just designed them with Helmholtz chambers riding shotgun. Like on the Super Street here, you have a resonance section. It's over here riding just behind the tips, but that's the resonator. That's the Helmholtz chamber. They're not really fighting each other for space. So hopefully that gives you a good understanding of what a Helmholtz chamber does, how it works. We love them. We absolutely think that they're one of the coolest things that has happened to exhaust technology in a really long time. So we're pretty stoked on them. If you've got any other questions, you can always go to our website, hit the Contact Us page. We have a contact form where you can email us, you can give us a call, let us know what car you have. Everybody's got a different ear, so everybody's going to be looking for a slightly different sound, or not be sure, you're looking at videos online and, this guy with this exhaust, but, you're not sure about the volume because your volume on your computer, you just turn the knob and it's louder or quieter. So everybody always has a lot of questions about exhaust. That's what we're here for. Give us a call, shoot us an email. We'll be happy to go over it with you and kind of guide you to whatever might be exactly what you're looking for. Have a great day.